Research shows that one easy diet swap can reduce blood pressure and heart attacks, according to researchers Chao Chi, Luna Alta Shoot, and Bruce Snell. 1 in 3 Australian adults has high blood pressure, hypertension. Excess salt, sodium increases the risk of high blood pressure, so everyone with hypertension is advised to reduce salt in their diet. But despite the decades of strong recommendations, we have failed to get Australians to cut their intake. It's hard for people to change the way they cook, season their food differently, pick low-salt foods off the supermarket shelves, and accept a less salty taste. And now there's a simple and effective solution: potassium-enriched salt. It can be used just like regular salt, and most people don't notice any important difference in taste. Switching the potassium-rich salt is feasible in a way that cutting salt intake is not. Our new research concludes clinical guidelines for hypertension should give patients clear recommendations to switch. What is potassium-enriched salt? Potassium-enriched salts replace some of the sodium chloride that makes up regular salt with potassium chloride. So the sodium chloride is switched for potassium chloride. They're also called low sodium salt, potassium salt, heart salt, mineral salt, or sodium reduced salt. Potassium chloride looks the same as sodium chloride and tastes very similar. Potassium-enriched salts work to lower blood pressure not only because it reduces sodium intake, but also because it increases potassium intake. Insufficient potassium, which mostly comes from fruit and vegetables, is another big cause of high blood pressure. Insufficient potassium. What is the evidence? We have strong evidence from a randomized trial of 20,995 people that switched to potassium-rich salt, lowers blood pressure and reduces the risks of stroke, heart attack, and early death. The participants had a history of stroke or were 60 years of age or older and had high blood pressure. An overview of 21 other studies suggests much of the world's population could benefit from potassium-enriched salts. The World Health Organization's 2023 Global Report on Hypertension highlighted potassium-enriched salt as an affordable strategy to reduce blood pressure and prevent cardiovascular events such as strokes. What should the clinical guidelines say? We teamed up with researchers from the United States, Australia, Japan, South Africa, and India to review 32 clinical guidelines for managing high blood pressure across the world. Our findings are published today in the American Heart Association journal, Hypertension. We found current guidelines don't give clear and consistent advice on using potassium-enriched salt. While many guidelines recommending increased dietary potassium intake and all refer to reduced sodium intake, only 2 guidelines, the Chinese and European, recommended using potassium-enriched salt. To help guidelines reflect the latest evidence, we suggest specific wording which could be adopted in Australia and around the world. Now, why do so few people use it? Well, this is the first time I've heard of it, but anyway, most people are unaware of how much salt they eat or health issues it can cause. Few people know a simple switch to potassium-rich salt can help lower blood pressure and reduce the risk of a stroke and heart disease. Limited availability is another challenge. Several Australian retailers stock potassium-rich salt, but there is usually only one brand available, and it's often on the bottom shelf or on a special food aisle. Potassium-rich salts also cost more than regular salt, though it's still low to cost compared to most other food, and not as expensive as many fancy salts now available. A 2021 review found potassium-enriched salts were marketed in only 47 countries, and those were mostly high-income countries, prices ranging from the same as regular salt to almost 15 times greater. Even though generally more expensive, potassium-rich salt has the potential to be highly cost-effective for disease prevention. Preventing harm? A frequently raised question about using high potassium-enriched salt is the risk of high blood pressure levels hyperkalemia in the approximately 2% of the population with serious kidney disease. People with serious kidney disease are already advised to avoid regular salt and to avoid foods high in potassium. No harm from potassium-rich salt has ever been recorded in any trials done to date, but all studies were done in a clinical setting with specific guidance for people with kidney disease. Our current priority is to get people being managed for hypertension to use potassium-rich salt because healthcare providers can advise against its use in people at risk of hyperkalemia. In some countries, potassium-rich salt is recommended to the entire community because the potential benefits is so large. A modeling study showed almost 500,000 strokes and heart attacks would be averted every year in China if the population switched to potassium-rich salt. What will happen next? In 2022, the health minister launched the National Hypertension Task Force, which aims to improve blood pressure control rates from 32% to 70% by 2030 in Australia. Potassium-rich salt can play a key role in achieving this, and we're working with the task force to update Australian hypertension management guidelines and to promote the new guidelines to health professionals. In parallel, we need potassium-enriched salt to be more accessible. We're engaging stakeholders to increase the availability of these products nationwide. The world has already changed its salt supply once from regular salt to iodized salt. Iodization efforts began in the 1920s and took the best part of 100 years to achieve traction. Salt iodization is a key public health achievement of the last century, preventing goiter, a condition where your thyroid gland grows larger, and enhancing educational outcomes for millions of the poorest children in the world, as iodine is essential for normal growth and brain development. The next switch to iodized and potassium-rich salt offers at least the same potential for global health gains, but we need to make it happen in a fraction of the time. Sayu Chu Luna, Scienta Lecturer, UNSW Sydney, Professor Cardiovascular Medicine, and UNSW Sydney, and Bruce Neal, Executive Director, George Institute Australia. This is from the conversation under Creative Commons here on Science Alert. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.